Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending my presentation, during which I will mainly refer to the second and third chapter of my PhD. The title of my presentation is How a Better Understanding of um, the spatial dimension of paleorecords can help to improve the reconstructions of the past. Um, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So the area my PhD is focused on is the Western spruce feathermost domain that is represented in green on the map. This territory is characterized by its forests, mostly composed of black spruce, and that fire is the most prevalent disturbance in the domain. A great part of this territory is managed by the Ministry of Forests, Wildlife and Parks and follows since 2013 an ecosystemic-based management that relies on references. And these references aim at guiding management in order to mimic the natural dynamic of the forests. And one of these targets is the fire cycle. It is defined thanks to dendrochronological studies, and it is of 150 years for the territory that I'm studying. But the pending problem that I had to face during my PhD is that in paleo, we are not able to reconstruct a fire cycle, but we reconstruct FRI, so a fire return interval. As on the right-hand side of the slide, if we have a fire cycle of 150 years, it means that on average, the entire area burned in 150 years. As on the left side, you see that if the charcoal analysis reveals that the FRI is of 150 years, it means that two fire events happened 150 years apart in the vicinity of the lakes. That's what we both metrics tell us about the environment is different, and the fire cycle seems better for explaining fire vegetation interactions. The main reason why we are still not able to reconstruct the fire cycle is mostly because paleoreconstructions are not geographically explicit, which means that we don't know where the charcoal particles come from. Indeed, every time a fire burns biomass, charcoal particles are emitted and spread out in the environment, mostly due to the wind. And some charcoal particles will deposit on lake surface and then drown to be incorporated in the lake sediments. In order to calibrate statistical links between charcoal and fire, we need to better understand the taphonomic processes that affect the charcoal particles from the projection in A to the transportation by wind in C to the deposition at the end in the lake sediment in F. But for example, what happens if the fire is more distant from the lake, or if the fire is bigger or more severe? Will we be able to see it in the charcoal measured in the sediments? And can we calibrate statistical links that between fire characteristics and lake sediments? The second chapter of my PhD was published this summer in the Holocene, and it aimed at establishing fire charcoal links between by studying annual records of charcoal based on year-to-year observation of the environment of the lakes. And one of the results that we had is displayed on the graph that shows you the linear regression that we performed. One on the left side between charcoal measurement and fire severity, and on the right side, the link between charcoal and a burn area. But if we look at, for example, Lake Sean, that is symbolized by S followed by the fire year, we can see that, for example, we have a similar charcoal median surface area influx for S 2013 and S 2014. As the corresponding fires have very different fire severity or burn area. And similarly, for severe and extended fires, such as the one of S 2015, the final charcoal signal is lower than we could have expected according to the regression that we ran. That tells us that more taphonomic processes are involved in the transportation of the particle. In the chapter that I want to present, we aimed at evaluating if the above-mentioned links would be applicable when using sedimentary charcoal to go deeper in the past. This chapter was accepted in clause 1, and we will go to the review soon. To run this experiment, we studied 6 lakes located in the eastern part of the Spruce Feathermost domain. The methodology is mostly based on the study of fire characteristics measured within a 30-kilometer zone around the lakes. And we also reconstructed the fire severity using satellite data and the DNBR. And we also reconstructed the burn area for the period spanning from 1975 to 2016 using the data from the ministry. So on the left, you can see a close-up on Lakes Becas and Galinet that I will use as an example for my presentation. And on the right, you can see a short course sediment similar to the ones that we studied for the 6 lakes. We also established the age depth model in order to date the sediments. This is a picture of Lake Becas. So you can see that this site is interesting since we have a forested patch and also a burn area that spreads out to the lake shore. Sorry, to the lake shore. These graphs show the charcoal number in the vertical axis according to the time for the different lakes of the study. At first, they all seem different in terms of time window and pattern. And these differences can be partially attributed to the taphonomic processes that affect the charcoal particles. And that is puzzling because some lakes are relatively close, as shown by the colored rectangle. And for example, Becas and Galinet sequences have very different patterns of accumulation. But also, we noticed that for years with extreme fire activity, as for example, 1991 and 2005, the lakes have accumulated more charcoal. That led us to run a regional analysis with all the sequences in order to investigate if we can define a regional relationship between charcoal particles and fire. On the graph, the solid line represents the composite charcoal accumulation for all the lakes, and the vertical red bars shows the regional fire severity. Overall, we can see a pattern of charcoal accumulation during periods with a high number of fires. We can also identify the extreme fire years that we saw earlier, thus showing that regional synthesis of charcoal sequence can be used to reconstruct the regional fire regime. This satellite image shows you a fire that took place in the Spruce Feathermost domain, very close to my lakes in 2005. And what's interesting to see is that according to the location, the fire plume can or cannot pass over some lakes, and thus they can receive a different quantity of charcoal particles, thus highlighting the importance of the taphonomic process, sorry. So this study helped to better understand what is actually controlling the charcoal production, transportation, and deposition in the sediments. These processes are complex and show a great variability. Also, there are still unknowns concerning, for example, the real impact of remobilization and sediment focusing, and also dating on the charcoal signal. But in the end, calibration studies should help us to improve our understanding of past ecosystem dynamics. It should also help us to bridge the gap, the vocabulary gap, if we can say it this way, that exists between paleoscientists and management or stakeholders. And also, it should enhance the study of several archives in order to describe a new site or a new landscape by combining, for example, sediments from lakes, from peatlands, or charcoals from forest soils in order to better describe the regional fire regime. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Andy. Are there any questions for Andy in his presentation? I really like that photo, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So, hi, Andy. Can you go back on your slide with the peak of charcoal? This one, yes.
Okay.
Because you explained that the peak could be because of the wind, like the direction of the wind. Do you think that could be possible that the precipitation amount could also play a role to explain this peak? Like during the year of when you record this peak, you could have like more precipitation and more runoff, and that could bring more charcoal in your lake.
In another chapter, so the one I just referred actually, during which we, sorry, okay, that one, while we calibrated the different regression between charcoal and fire, we noticed that the runoff was negligible because when you study, when you want to study a peculiar fire event, most of the charcoal particles that were emitted by this fire will deposit within the year of the production. So for the so that's a first point. So we found that it was not negligible, but it does not represent the most of the charcoal particles. But we found with the taphonomical processes that we still have unknowns. Sorry, it's a lot of moving, but we are still a lot of unknowns, and all the most concerning, as I said, remobilization and concentration. So probably a part of what we cannot explain in the final charcoal signal can be partly due to the secondary deposition. That we were not able to measure at the with yearly records, and that probably is comprised within the error in this study. It can be linked, and I'm sure it can be really interesting to investigate.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Andy? I really like the photo by the lake where you showed a very stark edge of the fire relative to the coniferous forest there. At first, I thought it was two photos side by side, right, with the shade of the trees in the lake. But then I realized, whoa, that's a fire, right? It's two different photos. I mean, it's one photo.
Exactly. That was really interesting to see.
And then, is that wind throw afterwards for the trees being blown down? Or do you think that was an effect of the fire pulling the trees?
So maybe you mean on the left side of the where I put the forest patch?
Yeah, like maybe Yves or Sylvie could answer that. Do you think it's the fire that pulled those trees in?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, thank you very much, Andy, for this.
Thank you.